world, and welcome to another episode of the South African Spies podcast. Today is another segment of the Bramdo Bites series, and Mickey and I have decided that we're going to do a little bit of tying up some loose ends from our previous episodes and just recapping that, all in preparation for some very big stuff that's about to come. So, hi Mickey, and welcome back to the podcast.
Hello.
So, Mickey, I know you and I have obviously listened to our episodes that we've recorded. And I think this is just a really nice opportunity for us to think back to when we listened, what we kind of left out, and anything that we, maybe want to add or expand on, and really just recap those episodes one more time before we move into this new chapter that the podcast is about to embark on.
Yeah, I mean, it was obvious that we would leave out a lot of stuff and a lot of important things that happened along the way because it's 30-40 minute episodes covering 5-6 years of our life at a time. I'm sure as this podcast grows and our series continues and we get to episode 1000 and something, we'll eventually catch up to all the stories.
Oh, yo, episode 1000. Let us get to triple digits first, right?
We'll get there.
Yeah, we're not too far off. So, yeah, I think, when I went back and I looked at all the episodes that we have done, and I realized that my very first proper episode was me introducing, my granny and the conversation that I had with her. And then I never really went back to it to kind of give any more context or talk about it in any other chance because it just didn't have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and it's a bit difficult with someone older, with technology being here. It's not like you can go to her house and just set her up with the camera and mic and just start chatting. It's a bit more prep than that.
Yeah, exactly. And also from experience, we know how that conversation went. We started somewhere and then we ended up talking about 10 other different things before we got back to the question. So it's also, a different type of conversation in general. But I think in this time since that episode's come out, we've kind of heard a lot about how my granny is interacting with everybody on that side. And I think the family who's actually gotten to listen to the episode and then they had the stories, to ask her and talk to her about, which is really cool. And I'm pretty bummed that we missed out on those additional conversations.
Yeah, we're going to have to go back at some point and just say, okay, everyone get behind the table. We're going to have a dinner and talk about everything you already spoke about, but for us.
Yeah, exactly. Or we're just going to corner my granny, get her to cook everything. And then we just sit and we eat and we listen.
Just remember, I'm a coconut. I don't eat all the stuff.
Okay, fine. She'll make something normal for you and I'll eat all the tasty stuff. I'll have the crab and I'll have the fresh chicken and I'll have the...
Trotters.
Oh, and I'll have the trotters.
Yeah, I won't have any of that.
She'll make mutton curry for you.
Yeah, she can make mutton curry.
Yeah, that you'll eat.
Yeah.
Fish curry?
I've only eaten your fish curry. And liked it, huh?
Well, that's not saying much. Maybe you should eat a fish curry. Maybe that will be better. Actually, don't eat it because I can't make it like that, so rather not.
Actually, I lie. There's one other person's fish curry that I really liked, which was my granny's sister.
Oh, Akka's.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, she's passed, so
yeah.
You're just going to have to deal with mine until you taste something better. I'm so sorry. Sorry, not sorry kind of
I'm
thing.
not sorry. I enjoy it. We're going to have it soon, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, but it's just because you haven't had anything else to compare to.
Plus, the fish that we get here is better than in South Africa, so it tastes better.
Well, true, considering I don't like fresh fish, and this piece that we get here is actually quite nice. But still, I think when you have a different fish curry, you're gonna be like, yay, Alisha, what's going on here?
Okay, we'll share that experience when it happens.
If it happens.
Because
I don't know who in their right mind is ever gonna cook fish curry for you when you return.
Very true.
Nobody would think to do that. Yeah, so anyway, talking about my granny and stuff, I think there's so many things that's come up, especially, after that episode, we spoke to my uncles and we're like, hey, Ma did this and she told us all these stories and we kind of ratted them out on a couple of things. And they were pretty interested, to listen in and to hear and to kind of relive that. And I think that's the true essence and joy of this podcast and having those stories is that it's allowing everybody else to also relive.
Yeah, and getting their side of the coin.
And it's also made me realize that maybe not everybody remembers something the exact same way.
No one remembers anything the same way. I can tell you now, when my mother and I relive stories, which we'll get to later, it's very different recollections of the same story.
Yeah, actually she did. She shouted at you for not mentioning things. She's like, what about that?
Yeah, I'll mention that story in this podcast.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, but I'm really looking forward to having more like that and to really just finding a way to get everybody else to share those stories and share those experiences. I really like hearing about how her as a granny, or at that point as a mother, had her sons and, daughters do things and how she dealt with them like being, naughty in inverted commas, because I don't know what naughty was back then versus now. But like how she dealt with them and how they dealt with each other, and certain instances that maybe she thought was like this big drama between them was maybe not such a big thing between them. They like got over it.
Yeah,
I am looking forward to that. And then I think, moving on to like getting to know us a bit better, I actually completely forgot what we had said in getting to know us, because I feel like this has just been like an ongoing conversation and I couldn't really get any recollection as to what exactly we spoke about.
I think for us it's also very difficult because we've kind of had this conversation with each other from 3 years ago when we met to now, like over and over and over. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint, okay, did I say that in the podcast, or was it on a date, or was it just at home one day?
Yeah, same.
So it's really, really difficult to say, okay, I know I left out X, Y, Z. I need to say it because in my head, we've said everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I completely agree. But I know when I had to go back and listen to it again, in that, getting to know the Bramdos episode, we spoke about ourselves, how we grew up, the environments we grew up in, and the kind of friends we had, and how it was like going to school as like Indian kids, like primary school. Spoke a lot about how your mother used to whoop you into shape and get you that pretty handwriting that you now have.
My mother still does that now. I mean, if she had to, I actually remember when I was signing for my first house and she was watching me sign documents and she was like, why are you writing it so untidy?
Did you get some PTSD?
Not really.
Because you knew she couldn't tear up those forms?
No, she could. She could. It's just, I think over the years, my mother and I formed a better relationship than the teenage boy that would like throw his toys. So we could laugh about it at a later stage rather than get dramatic.
Yeah. In teenage years, that's the episode where we spoke about how you would think that you're too smart and they thought you were studying.
Oh, yeah.
In the meantime, you were busy playing PlayStation. And what was your mother's words?
So my mother decided to, she thinks she knew all along.
I'm sure she did. When she listened to that episode and then she spoke to us afterwards and she's like, yeah, very nice. I love the fact that he thinks I didn't know what was going on. I just left him for most of the time.
So what you're saying is even my mother came around to my studying technique, which means for our future kids, I can teach them my technique and you'll come around too.
Not a chance. High hopes. You have very high hopes, honey. It's not gonna happen. That is not a thing. Yeah, I think even, when we spoke about being teenagers and kind of how we were and realized that we both were really like complete opposite teenagers. I was the rebellious one. You were the complete opposite of that. The non-rebellious one. And I think your mother even like verified that. And she was like, non-problematic child, period. She said that to us the other day.
She said I was non-problematic, but I'm sure I had my problems along the way, and it's just less than other boys.
And then the other thing we spoke about in that episode was our matric results and how we celebrated that. And my best friend did give me some words about that as to how I'm outing him to the world.
That's the funny thing, right? So we've been very careful to not mention names and not mention exactly who they are.
I don't even know why.
Especially for certain people who will be on the podcast at a later stage. And I just thought we'd wait until that point when they're on.
And introduce them in this big reveal.
Well, not just introduce them, but then at least there's a bit more consent.
Yeah.
Even though we know the consent is there. But it's funny how we were speaking to one of my other friends and she was like, oh, So when you were speaking about your friend and your other friend, was it this person and that person? And she knew exactly who I was talking about because obviously she was there. And on your side as well, everyone knows who you're talking about and who this person is that did didn't get stamped at the club thing.
But I don't even know why you were surprised, honestly, because it's literally the story I tell all the time. That is my most famous story about him. And then his most famous story about me in that same time was how we had detention because they were playing cricket on the field and we all bunked class to go play cricket on the field. I don't know why I bunked because I wasn't playing cricket. So I was just there to skip a class. And I'm pretty sure that class was accounting. And yeah, we got caught. The whole group of us got caught. We ended up getting into detention. But our detention teacher was a little bit of a not so present teacher. So, he was the kind of teacher where you'd have your exam written with him, but everybody in the class would be talking and you just can't control the class. So it was the same thing for detention. So we kind of took the table that was like closest to the door and each one of us snuck out. And I was the last one to sneak out, but I didn't realize that my friend had his bag on the desk and I was supposed to bring it. So I left without his school bag. And then he had to go back in and get his school bag and got another detention after that.
So I've actually heard that story 3 times.
Yeah.
Because the first time was when I first met said friend.
Yeah.
The first time you introduced me to him. Second time was when I proposed to you and he gave a speech and he said it.
Yeah.
And the third time was at our wedding when he said the speech again.
Well, and then now.
Well, yeah,
again.
Now again.
So that's great. Well, I don't think it's going to be the last time you hear that story because...
I'm pretty sure it's going to go on forever and ever. Every time we get together and sitting around the table having dinner or drinks or whatever, it's going to come up again.
Without a doubt. It's definitely going to come up again. But I love that we have stories like that to reminisce about and retell. And, it still holds so much value. Yeah, so that was basically our teenage dirtbags episode. And I think we were really honest and really open about how we were and stuff at that time. And then we spoke about the talk we didn't get.
Yes, which we actually got some really good feedback from everyone who listened to that episode, from people we knew personally to people we didn't know who reached out and said, wow, that was great.
And also people who we didn't know reached out and said, oh my gosh, I thought it was only my generation.
And not just people that grew up in Joburg or people that grew up in Durban or whatever the case was. It was everyone from every different background was like, oh, we can all relate.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. I mean, it's not cool that nobody got the talk. It's not a nice
thing to relate about.
It's not cool that nobody got the talk, but it's nice to have something that everybody can literally relate to regardless of everything else.
Yeah, because now that everyone knows, okay, this is an issue across the board, we can all work towards fixing it.
That was a really good one, for that kind of feedback. And then we went on to do daddy issues. And I think those were really eye-opening conversations for a lot of the listeners. And I think it was a good one to have. Yeah. I know our moms listened to it and they were really proud of that episode because it was tackled from such a different perspective to what they're used to.
And I think it just highlighted to people that regardless of what your issues are, whether it be parents or any other hold-up in your childhood, it doesn't define you as who you are. It's just part of the experience of growing up and you build your character from there.
Exactly. I think it was a good one and I hope we can have more of those kind of conversations. I think that is enlightening for people, but also to just have it in a normal context of this is our experience, this is what it's been like, and have somebody relate.
Yeah, it's how we found it and from our own perspective, and it's not to say everyone must see it the same way.
Yeah. And well, that, also speaks to kind of the conversation we had about religion.
Yes, which is something, there's still a lot to talk about there, but I don't think we have enough episodes to fill all the issues.
Issues? Like what kind of issues?
Well, not issues, but all the opinions. And all the opinions and all the conversations that I've had regarding being an atheist and stuff. And also there's a lot still that is coming up when we talk about our weddings and how I learnt about my own religion through our wedding.
Yeah, true. But I also think that conversation itself probably came as a shock to a lot of people, both that know you and I think people just in this community itself. They were very shocked to have somebody say outright, like, I'm an atheist and this is where I stand and this is what it is and this is why.
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned in that episode, but growing up, not growing up, but I think more towards university years, when it came to dealing with Indian guys in conversations and stuff, and because I wasn't Christian, they would automatically assume, okay, you must be following a Hindu religion, whichever one it is. So when it came time for the big fasts and stuff, they would just assume that I would be fasting or doing the prayers and stuff. And they would always give this like shocked question, like, oh, you're not fasting today, it's this day. And I'm like, I don't even know what this day is.
Yeah.
And it was always so difficult for them to understand, how come? Don't your parents make you fast?
So do you think if they had to like listen back to this episode now, they'd have a better understanding of it? Or do you think that even after this, and this is more for the people who like really know you, do you think that they don't fully yet understand what it is to be an atheist? Because I think it's got such a denotation attached to it.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of that most people won't ever understand unless they're on the side of the fence. The people that did question me back then about, okay, how come I'm not doing this, probably would put it down to, oh, it's because he grew up in Joburg or because he grew up in a white area, that's why he's like that.
And yet we know from the number of people that we've spoken to, that's not the reason. That's not the kind of things. Yes, maybe it has some sort of influence, but it's not really the main factor that causes that.
Yeah.
Or that leads to that.
Yeah. That was, I think, what caused me or led me towards the way I think is more my tendency towards science and seeking answers through actual logical explanation and not faith.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's just who I am as a person.
You know, what's really been surprising from that conversation as well for me is, as somebody who considers herself to be not staunch, but who knows like about her own religion, I've actually realized, and this has come after talking to a lot of people, that there's still so much that I don't know. It's fascinating to still be at a point to learn, but it's also pretty sad for me because I feel like I should know more. It's not putting pressure on me to be like, oh, you have to go now and learn absolutely everything. But it does kind of feel like I thought I knew more than I actually did, which is fine.
But then also when we speak to other people, you'll also then get a bit more relieved because you realize most people that follow the religion don't know anything about the stories.
Some people that I've spoken to, I've realized are so deeply rooted and invested in it and follow everything, but they actually follow with understanding. And that's where I felt like, oh, okay, I am not there yet. I'm still quite a few steps behind.
Yeah, but it's also because you didn't start looking for those answers till very late.
True.
It's not like you've, from a teenager, you're 16 and stuff, and you now started to look at the religion. That came much later when you wanted to understand.
Yeah. I do hope, though, that being away from that kind of community and stuff doesn't hinder that ability.
I don't think it would because, I mean, you still follow, and as much as we can, we ask your guru to give us explanations, and he does a very good job as to explaining why, what, and how.
Yeah, I think that's probably the key, is to just keep asking questions to get that understanding.
Yeah, I agree. And then also, I think from that episode, one thing that was nice that came out of it is showing people that it's okay to have different views on faith in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it can work. You don't have to dictate to your partner what they should and shouldn't believe and how they should act in terms of their faith and anything surrounding that, because your faith is a personal relationship and it's for you and not for your partner. And I think we showed very nicely that we can function very well, very supportively, having different views on faith.
But I think we have so much more to also show on that point when it comes to faith, because I think it's, in relationships, and this is something we'll definitely speak about in future episodes, but I find that in relationships, it is such a big factor. It's one of those make or break factors for most people. But us going through the weddings, our daily lives, and absolutely everything else, that was never something after our first conversation. It was never something that really did anything negative. But it also took a lot of work to get to that point.
It did. It took a lot of talking and being open about what we feel, how we feel, and what we're comfortable with.
But it even took work before that, because we both had to go through so much in our own personal lives and past experiences to get to that point.
Which is what I'm looking forward to, is when we start discussing our relationship and past relationships and how we make things work. And I think people are going to really respond well to what we have to say, even though we're not this, super couple, but we make things work.
I think we do handle a lot of things differently. And to be honest, maybe when we do talk about all those things, maybe not everybody will agree with the way we handle things.
I would be surprised if everyone agreed.
Yeah, true. But I think it's nice to just be able to have these kind of like open, honest, transparent conversations for people to listen to.
Yeah, and we're just going to say what we do and how it works for us and how we view it. And if you're happy and relate to it, great. If you don't, let us know, and that's also great.
Yeah, it's good to hear more feedback. I do hope we get more feedback. We did get quite a bit of feedback from previous episodes, and that's been really helpful. It's been really nice, but it's also been a really good thing for us to continue doing this, because I know it's making a difference. It's doing something.
Yeah. And I've enjoyed both the positive feedback and the negative feedback. The criticism that we've got has been really helpful in building episodes, future episodes that matter, and getting the podcast and how we want to have these conversations to a better place.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not every conversation is going to be for everybody, and that's okay too.
It's not supposed to be for everyone.
It's not supposed to be like for everybody, but I do hope the majority of it, you're getting something out of. Now, our last conversation that we did was talking about party animals, right? And the party animals that we were. Now, tell us what your mother said after she listened to that episode and she phoned us. What did your mother say?
So she wanted to know why I didn't mention the one day where she got into a fight with one of my friends.
Now you have to tell us the story.
Let's go to the beginning of the story. One of my friends from work was having her birthday party, and she invited me to go with because we were friends in the office. And so I said, okay, cool. I'll go with you, but can I bring another friend of mine, because I don't really know her friends and I didn't want to be sitting there alone the whole night. And we went out with them, began in a hotel somewhere in Rosebank, and they were having drinks and it's quite nice. And then they said, okay, cool. We're in Rosebank, and I forget the name of the club. Was it Jet?
Set was in Rosebank, yeah.
Was in Rosebank. That was like a heavy Indian club.
It was the same owners, basically, from Jet. Yeah.
But these were not Indian girls that we were out with from the office. And we were two Indian guys, and we ended up at this Indian club. But anyway...
Took them back to your roots, man.
Not my roots. We were there, we partied till a bit late in the evening, and then it was time to go home. So they got in the car, went back, because they had a designated driver, and they went to their way. And we said, no, it's cool, we'll get a taxi and we'll go back to my mom's house. And after they had left, we were like, okay, let's get a taxi. And we looked around and there was no taxis. And this is before the time of Uber. So we couldn't get a taxi where we were at the club. So we decided, okay, McDonald's is not too far. There must be taxis up there. Like, surely. So we walked up to the McDonald's. Nothing. Couldn't see anything. Couldn't... Near Rosebank, near the zone, or all of that, there was no taxi. So we're like, okay, now what? It's like 3 a.m. We're not going to call anyone to come pick us up. Maybe if we walk a little bit further down the road, along the main road, we'll see a taxi and we'll stop them and we'll go from there. And eventually we ended up walking all the way to Norwood Mall. And we're basically halfway. We walked halfway from Rosebank to my mother's house. There's literally no reason now to get a taxi from here. And as we were walking, There was actually a police car that was driving alongside us because they thought we were dodgy. And not alongside us, but just behind us alongside us.
They were kind of like tailing.
They were
just keeping
an eye on what we were doing. So we carried on walking because then at least we were under the safety of a police car. This is still the time where you could trust the police.
True. Mm-hmm. Then
they saw someone skip a red light in front of us, so they sped off past. We lost our police cover. And then we got eventually over Louis Bota. That was a tough climb up the hill. And then we got to the top of the hill. We're like, okay, we're almost home now. It's downhill from here. We get down almost to my mother's house. We almost got attacked by an owl.
An owl. Luckily, an owl and nothing else, or no one else.
Yeah, luckily. But it was a huge owl. It was big.
I would have tried to catch it and bring it home as a pet.
No, the thing was huge.
Yeah, still.
And then we got back to my mother's house. It was like, sun was just about rising. And that was it. And then I think that was the next day, we went out again.
Oh, gosh.
So obviously my mother was already pissed.
Yeah.
Not the next day, I think it was the next week. So she was pissed at us from that we walked. Like, why couldn't you just call? Someone would have come and picked you up. So the next week we went out with my sister, her boyfriend, and the same friend. And we got to the club in Sandton. And we were a bit late to the entrance. So my friend thought it was a great idea to go and order, 3 shots of absinthe each. And the bartender thought, this guy is cute. So the bartender was flirting with my friend and he gave him double shots.
Oh, gosh.
So we ended up having 6 shots of absinthe each before we had drank anything else. So as you can tell, the night went downhill from there.
I mean, was there much of a night left after that?
I don't remember. I do remember a lot of my sister's friends came around and we were all partying together, and eventually the night ended with me sleeping under my sister's car.
Was this night of McDonald's?
Yeah, and then I slept in McDonald's, or in the car park in McDonald's.
In the spot.
In the spot, yes.
You were the car.
I was the car sleeping
You became
in
the car.
And then one of her friends carried me, put me in his car, took me home. My friend kept asking for my sister's boyfriend. He wanted to make sure my sister's boyfriend was with him at all times, that he was taken care of, and he refused to sleep with anyone unless my sister's boyfriend was in the same room with him.
Oh, okay.
So eventually they got him into bed. He proceeded to throw up in my sister's trash can, which didn't have, it's not a solid trash can, it was a paper trash can. It was those meshy ones.
Okay.
And he threw up in that.
Ugh.
And then he went down to my mother's room at probably 3:30 in the morning, and he started knocking on the door and screaming at her to open the gate because he needed to go because he had to give tuition in the morning.
In that state?
Then my mother was like, exactly, in that state. Are you really going to drive? And he was like, I have to go. You don't understand. I have to go. And my mother was like, I'm not letting you go. And eventually it got to a point where my mother was like, okay, just go. I'll open and you go. So he drove to the security gate. Now the security gate opens towards the car. And he was hooting at the gate to make them open. And the security guard was trying to tell him to go back so that he can open. But he thought the security guard was telling him to go back home. So he got even more angry. So there was a whole thing that happened there. I was sleeping, by the way, through all of this. And eventually they let him out. He got home and stuff. And then the next morning I just woke up because my mother hit me. And it's like, you better phone your friend and find out that he's alive. I'm like, what do you mean he's alive? She said, he left. Do you even know where he is? I'm like, no. So yeah. And then I stayed in my room the rest of the day because I wasn't going to leave the room.
Yeah, but that wasn't because you were in trouble. That was because you felt like trash.
Yeah, that was the worst.
Damaged.
I think I've never ever drank again like that night.
I don't blame you. But yeah, that was a story. Your mother definitely was like, yeah, why you never say all these things? So I love that, like, your mom specifically listens to the episodes and she really gives us good feedback. Like, it's amazing. I absolutely love that. But yeah, now at least when she listens to this, she'll know that we did say all the things.
No, she'll move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one.
Because there were so many.
I mean, because I partied so little when we went out, it was
a thing.
It was big nights.
Yeah. Makes sense. But yeah, that is basically the recap of the episodes that we've done so far.
Yeah.
And I think to us it feels like a lot, but it's not really. And I think we've just scraped the surface of all the conversations that I know we're going to have. And we're just really setting the foundation for these conversations so that later on when we talk about things, the context of it really makes sense.
Yeah. I'm actually looking forward to upcoming episodes now where we can talk about other things, but then touch on stuff that happened in teenage years or growing up in the younger years and stuff like that, and people will understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, exactly. We're calling this the recap and, tying up loose ends and stuff because there is some really cool things coming for the podcast. And if you would like to hear more about that, then I suggest you tune into the next episode because that is where we will be discussing it.
Where you'll be discussing
Where I will be discussing it. Yes, that is correct.
It'll be your first solo episode since the start.
Since the start. Sure. Okay. That's no pressure. I can do this. But yes, I am looking forward to, letting everybody know kind of what's happening with the podcast. So until then, I'll just be saying Shup, sweet and aware. Lots of love.